The Royals need to extend Bobby Witt Jr., but what's that contract going to look like? Let's check it out. Let's talk about it.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What really set this topic in motion for me was last Friday. Julio Rodriguez signed a massive contract extension with the Seattle Mariners. The base of it is 12 years, about $210 million. And there's a bunch of incentive-laden stuff with like player options based on MVP finishes, Silver Sluggers, All-Star participation that can ultimately get to 18 years, $470 million if all the options and incentives are hit, which is nuts to give a 21-year-old. But Julio Rodriguez has been one of the best young stars in the game. Going to win Rookie of the Year this year. Sorry, Royals fans, he is. But it gives you a good idea of another team investing in a young star early. We've seen the Braves do it with a lot of their young core. They went to Ronald Acuna early. They went to Ozzie Albies. We've seen them this year with Austin Riley and Michael Harris going and signing some of these guys to longer-term deals, buying out some of these league minimum and arbitration years, a couple years of free agency, and you go from there. In the case of Julio Rodriguez, the Mariners are trying to make him face of their franchise for the next almost 2 decades.
Yeah,
which is
smart.
Honestly, it's smart. It's almost like investing in your young talent and wanting to keep them around as not a big market team that's going to attract a ton of big free agents. It's a really good idea, right? The Royals aren't going to invest. They're not going to invest in free agency in that way. They're not going to go and sign 9-figure guys in free agency. They're just not. So how do you go and allocate some of those resources? You go and lock up these guys and make them your face of the franchise. If I'm John Sherman, I'm JJ Piccolo, I'm Dayton Moore, I would never let Bobby Witt Jr. walk out that door. I would right now, and it's even going to get more expensive now because of the Julio contract. That sets precedent for these guys. Like we're going to see it with Adley Rutschman, O'Neal Cruz, Gunnar Henderson, other young players that are coming up and starting to become these young superstars in the game. But you don't let that guy walk out the door. It's that simple.
No, I 100% agree. And I have so many thoughts running through my head about logistically how this works. So many different thoughts that we might wind up getting to. But like, I think before we start, I think we have to establish, like, yes, like this is a guy you have zero desire to let, leave. You believe. I think everyone that watches baseball believes in what Bobby Witt Jr.'s talent is able to do. And this is the kind of player that you bet on. This is the kind of player that, you anticipate will, exceed expectations, right? That will be a steady presence. That's not going to quote unquote bust out. The thing I keep coming back to though, is the difference between what Julio Rodriguez is dealing with in Seattle and what we're dealing with here in Kansas City is Julio's bought in to what that organization has been able to do to this point. Yep. They are a winning organization. They are playing well. They are trending in a phenomenal direction. And it looks like the early portion of his career is in a window where they legitimately have a chance to win a World Series in the next few years. Then I look at the Royals. And if I'm Bobby Witt Jr., I'm a little bit more hesitant at the outlook of this organization. I'm a little bit more nervous about deciding I want to spend the next 18 years of my career in Kansas City. That's what scares me is like, we can talk about, there's so many things that we can talk about with the idea of this, but it takes two to tango. And at the onset, I'm a little concerned that Bobby Witt Jr. wouldn't take that deal. I mean, his dad's been through, the professional ranks before. He's seen a lot. I don't know if his counsel is going to want him to do that. I'm nervous about the idea of Bobby Witt Jr. wanting to be here for the next 18 years. That's what scares me. Like, just as an insecure Royals fan, that's what scares me.
And that's a totally fair thing. And that's something that all small market teams go through, right? Of trying to, you have these young guys, and as a fan, you just think, I'm going to really enjoy these 6 years before they go to free agency,
Ugh.
which is just a disgusting feeling.
It's painful. It hurts.
And honestly, like, it's not just gross on the surface of being a fan. Like, it's gross the fact that that front offices let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can cry poor all you want. If you really want to spend money, they'll do it. Teams will do it.
Oh yeah, and I mean,
Seattle is not a massive market. Like,
right.
you have money up there because of like Microsoft and Boeing, and I get that. But that's not a big market. That's not Atlanta. That's not Houston. That's not New York. That's not Los Angeles. And you know what their owner does? He goes and he gives a damn. And he wants to go spend money.
Yeah.
And they gave $115 million to Robbie Ray. They gave essentially $500 million to Julio Rodriguez. And they're not done. From what I've heard, they're going to lock up like Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, like some of these other guys that like they're up next. When you have a guy like Bobby Witt Jr., like the Royals have had generational type players in their system. Like, obviously, it's a different era, but you had George Brett who spent his whole career here. But you had Carlos Beltran, let him walk out the door. You had Johnny Damon, you let him walk out the door. You had Jermaine Dye, you let him walk out the door. You can even look at like Eric Hosmer, Lorenzo Cain, you let them walk out. Do I think that I think Bobby Witt Jr. is on a different plane than any of those guys. The only guy close is Beltran.
Mm-hmm.
And
100%.
even then, the reason that Beltran left was because the Royals haggled over $300,000 in a contract. Let Bobby Witt Jr. walk out over something like that, I will be disgusted.
I don't think it'll get that drastic.
I don't think it'll get that drastic because it's different owner. It's also different ownership, right?
It is different ownership.
This to me is going to be the litmus test for how John Sherman is going to handle this team.
That's entirely fair.
It's as simple as this. If John Sherman gives a damn about the Kansas City Royals and wants to win, you pay $7 and you don't let him leave. You do everything you can. As a salesman, you don't make money by accident like that. If you're going to be an entrepreneur and make $1 billion, you obviously can sell Bobby Witt Jr. on why you should stay and make him the face of your franchise and the face of the city with 15 across the street.
I wonder if, and part of me just kind of wonders, if, how do I say this? This organization is on a, this is a pretty pivotal point for this organization where I think they're trying to figure out what the next version of this organization looks like. And when I say organization, does it mean Dayton Moore is a part of it? Does it mean Dayton Moore has to help kind of, change and adjust and tweak some things continually, specifically on the pitching side? Some of the leadership within the, with the on-field, Mike Matheny looking at you, Cal Eldred looking at you, the entire pitching infrastructure looking at you. I mean, are you leaning on Dayton Moore to spearhead that? And so, like, I just wonder, like, a little bit of me wonders with some of those question marks up in the air. Are you willing to let somebody that may not be around here be part of come to the, to the negotiation table too? Like, these are some of the things in the back of my head. It's like, I worry about if this team's worried about the next couple of years with how this organization is going to look. Do they even allow Dayton Moore to negotiate a big contract like that? You see, like, those are the things that I keep coming back to as well. It's like, and I'll be honest with you, I am one of the most pro Dayton Moore people here. I'm a huge Dayton Moore guy. And if I want someone coming to a negotiation table, it is Dayton Moore. But I could also see, if you're looking at John Sherman and you're questioning everything right now, if you actually care, there's probably some reasons that maybe you don't feel comfortable trying to do this right now with people that you don't know are going to be here long term either. Like, I just wish, and like, that's the thing. It's like, it comes back to we talk about on the player side, but it might even be on the team side too. Are we a little bit unsettled right now with this organization where they may not even feel comfortable, confident doing something like this, and that's a shame if that's the case. And I'm not trying to project and say that definitively. But at the same time, like, who knows? Like, these are the things I'm kind of just like scare me about where the organization is at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is coming up. This is an absolutely pivotal offseason because I thought that this year was going to be the year, and I talked about this way too much on this podcast, but I'll just bring it back around.
Fine.
That I thought this was good. I thought this was going to be the year that they at least take a step forward and that they go and win 77, 80 games. What the Orioles are doing right now. I don't expect the Royals to be in a playoff spot, but at least take that step forward.
Right.
And they're not doing that. They took a step back. And now the only reason they're semi-interesting to watch right now is because they finally begrudgingly brought the young guys up and, oh my God, they're playing better. What a concept that is.
It's
so
weird.
Now you're a year behind. You've wasted a year of service time on all of these pitchers, on all of these position players in a lost year. Next year, you have to take that step. And if you don't, when's it going to be?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, sell everything and let's just try and scrap it. Like, because what are you going to do? Because I don't want a redo of the 2015 era. Did they win a World Series? Yes. But what did they do after that? Because they like the service time on those guys was already about to run out. Those guys they were at 1 foot out the door by the end of the halfway through 2017. I don't want that again.
Failed core in between that too. Just a failed attempt to build a core, not getting anything out of that core previously. It's been a rough near decade now.
Well, what we're currently seeing is the sins of not just absolutely tearing it down and rebuilding in 2018.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it's like, we're paying for those sins. You feel like you're paying for those sins now. You might be paying for the sins even farther down the road. If you had been able to show a pulse differently, maybe that helps you come to the negotiation table a little bit better. If John Sherman's showing a willingness right now, he's going to have to show a willingness, I think, to build this, to help build and grow and develop this organization and not prioritize a stadium right now. If he wants to, if he does even have even a hint of hope to keep Bobby Witt Jr. and trying to sign Bobby Witt Jr. early.
And I think those can go hand in hand. Like,
exactly.
You sign Bobby Witt Jr. to a 15-year, $350 million extension. People will pay for that downtown stadium because they know for the next 15 years, they got their shortstop, like their guy.
They're a generational player.
A dude that can legitimately be a top 5 player in the sport.
And I think
in Kansas City, when you have that downtown stadium, along with the core that also still surrounds him, but him at your forefront matters. Like, could MJ be a guy that leads a core? Probably. He's a really good player. Could Nick Pratto maybe be that guy? Sure. But they're not number 7. Like, they're not the
faces.
No. So you can't let that face and that guy and that player walk out the door. And I know some people are jaded for some reason about how Bobby Witt Jr. has played this year. Let me just go through the stats. So slashing 251, 292, 442, 103 weighted runs created plus, slightly above league average, 1.8 F4, 18 home runs, 65 RBIs, 26 stolen bases. So we're about to have, so he's going to have a 2020 season by the end of the year. Only a few, not many rookies have done that. Yeah. That is a floor. And that is a ridiculous season as a 22-year-old.
And like, I have a lot of hope and optimism for his plate discipline over time too. Like, I actually think he's got a pretty good eye. I think there's probably some moments where he's a little bit too aggressive, but I actually feel like his plate discipline has a lot of projectability into it, where some of those other like things will start coming a little bit easier once he kind of overcomes that a little bit. Obviously, a sub 300 OBP is not particularly great. He's not drawing a ton of walks, but I do think like that's a projectable piece of his game where I think it'll come around. And then, I mean, happens. Good luck. I mean, good luck.
Here's what's hilarious.
I have to pay just to come to the table.
Yeah. So here's what's hilarious is Julio Rodriguez, who just got this massive deal and deservedly so, going to be rookie of the year and probably get MVP votes. Slashing 264, 324, 468, 129 weighted runs created plus with 21 homers, 65 RBIs, 23 stolen bases. Got a 3.5 WAR, and that's because he's playing center field at a pretty high clip. So just the positional value is a little different. Bobby Witt Jr. is not far off, but Julio is on a wild card team that's probably going to win 85, 90 games and go play in the playoffs. Yeah. So there's a little bit of difference.
He signed that deal in the middle of a playoff hunt. I mean, I'm not saying like these guys he's not making an emotional decision, but you feel better about committing yourself to 18 years. I mean, it's the same thing with Mahomes. Mahomes felt good about committing himself to 12 years within this organization because he has good relationships here. He sees the vision. He sees how this team built. He sees his involvement in helping this team build. That's the kind of stuff I think you got to show a little bit more before we even get to feel like to be in that position. Because like the Braves and the Mariners have had a lot more success than the Royals recently. And like that's the thing I'm not trying to be a downer, Joel, but
no,
these are the things I keep thinking about when it comes to this. I would do it in a heartbeat. I hope Bobby Witt Jr. wants to be around for the entirety of my kid's life. My kid could graduate college before Bobby Witt Jr. is done being a Royal. And I hope that's the case. I just think about all the scenario and everything, factoring around it is what kind of just makes me a little bit nervous.
No, it is a nerve-wracking thing. And I think some of this is the small market mentality, which is tough. And it's not a good place you want to be. But I think we've also seen like small market teams have made significant investments in their future. I mean, the Rays don't spend money at all on anybody. They get rid of guys during arbitration when the arbitration number is too high, and they just cut them. But they gave Wander Franco $180 million. They can get up to $220 million.
They did
if a team like the Rays, and the Rays are, again, I know they're a playoff team, but they don't spend money. Like the Royals spend money, but they spend money stupidly most of the time. So I don't know, maybe spend your money smartly on your cornerstone shortstop.
And I mean, and maybe some of the decision-making process recently is to lending itself to that a little bit more too, because they haven't really shelled out a bunch of cash recently.
No, this is a pivotal offseason for that in more ways than one.
Right. Greinke was the biggest contract they shelled out last year, and like about the only one it felt like. So
I think it was.
Yeah,
basically it was.
So, I mean, there's that to consider as well too. Like maybe they're gearing up to try to do something big in that regard. I hope so. I want to see Bobby Witt. I want my kid to see Bobby Witt for the entirety of his career.
Same. I want my kid to see it too. But yeah, it's a decision the Royals are going to have to consider over the next year or two. And if they don't consider over the next year or two, then we can just enjoy Bobby Witt Jr. until like 2028 and then go watch him in pinstripes, because that's probably just the way it'll trend, which will disgust me in ways that I don't even want to talk about.
Yeah, but Bobby would have to shave his hair.
Oh, that's true. The mullet is really, really good. Like,
yes, maybe there's hope there. Maybe there's hope. Maybe the tiebreaker is the hair.
Yeah, so I guess the final point I'll make here is you mentioned Patrick Mahomes, and I will always go back to this quote because it kind of rings in my brain whenever Bobby does something really special. Was Jim Callis of MLB.com and MLB Pipeline, when Bobby got drafted, talked about this kid can have the impact on the Royals like Patrick Mahomes had on the Chiefs. Like, I sit there and think about that and like the juxtaposition of having two absolute superstars in a city like Kansas City. Like, that doesn't happen often. And I know Salvi has endeared himself to the city, and deservedly so, but he's not the superstar, the generational talent that Bobby is. And if you can pair those two together in this city for at least the next 12 years, like, that's going to do wonders for what this city has to offer. And you sign him now, people will get invested in that downtown stadium. They'll want to go to that downtown stadium, and people will drum up the money for it. Like, I know people talk about all the time, they don't want it to be taxpayer funded. You pay Bobby Jr. $350 million, I'll shell out some money for it. That's fine. I live in Kansas. I'll still shell out some money for it. I don't care.
I think we're all going to shell out a little bit of money somewhere or another for it. Because, Yeah.
So, but not only do the Royals have Bobby Witt Jr., but they have a bunch of other young players that I think could be a really significant part of the core moving forward that you consider making a like Michael Harris type deal or an Ozzie Albies, like team-friendly contract extension too. Now, they robbed Ozzie Albies, but I'm not gonna get too far into the weeds on that one. But you have a group of players that you can go and give some contracts to as well that I think would be important for the core to have around Bobby Witt Jr. So it's not just Bobby Witt Jr. and a bunch of Jags.
Right? Yeah. Well, and this group is like, I love this group around him. Like, and I think this is the kind of group, like, I think what you've seen in the fight that this team's put through, and there's been some bumps and there's been some, lack of offensive production at times here or there, but I like the core that they have around them, MJ and Vinny and I mean, like they've got the right kind of core. This group has played together. Some of this core has played together in a lot of in a big capacity and in a lot of games. And like that's been valuable for this organization in the past when this team finally, did something I don't think either of us thought we'd see in our lifetime when they won the World Series. But like this is the kind of group you want to surround Bobby Witt, and maybe you try to keep a couple of these guys longer than their 6 years of service time too.
So I have 4 players in mind that are, I guess, 3 for sure that I would give long-term extensions to as a part of this. And one may kind of surprise people because I know he had a really good game yesterday, but he's not part of this list. MJ is that guy because I still do believe in his ability to catch, and especially with the automatic ball.
I was gonna say, is it because the
automatic zone? Yeah. Like, and he's such a good athlete behind the plate. Like, I think he'll be fine. Like, I'm not out on his defense behind the plate at all. Like, I'm just not. We had enough good data and enough of scouting record from his stuff in the minors that he's a really good defender behind the plate, and it's going to come. And then we got. So MJ is one, Vinny is one because I think he's endeared himself as a clubhouse leader 100%. That you can't let that guy leave. And then Brady Singer. I think you lock up at least one of those guys, and I
think Vinny P's a very reasonable. Like, I think he's one of those guys that I think you could potentially do that to. Like if you were to ask me the 3 of those, like I think that's a guy that makes a little bit more sense as far as feasibility of being able to actually execute it. A little bit older. I think I think he's like 24, almost 25, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And maybe and it doesn't have to be as robust of a deal, maybe necessarily, but buy a couple extra years of his free agency out. Like that's not a bad. That takes him into his mid 30s, and I think that probably sits well for Vinny Pasquantino.
I would probably go, just if I had to put a number to it, I'd probably give him like an 8 for 65. I think that would be a really good number. MJ would probably be more like the Michael Harris deal, like an 8 for 82 or close to 90.
I think it'd be a little bit more, honestly.
Without blinking, I would do that.
Yeah.
Or I would even look, if you don't want to maybe do the Bobby extension now and go kick that can down the road a little bit and lock up the young core first, then you give him almost like an Austin Riley type deal, like a 10 for 180 or something like that, and backload it a little bit so you can work that Bobby extension early. That wouldn't be a bad move. And then you go and get at least one of these pitchers. And I think Brady Singer has shown he can be that guy. You give him but even though the volatility of pitchers is kind of tough, you don't see them taking these kind of deals, like a 7 for 75, something like that. Like I think would be, or maybe you even go a little shorter, like a 5 for 75 or a 5 for 80. I think would be really nice at this point. He's already in year 3. So that buys out a couple free agent years. You can pay him a little more on the back end, and you lock him up as your 2-3 in the rotation. Still, what gives you an opportunity to go spend money in free agency and trade for a cost control pitcher you have to pay in arbitration.
Yeah, I love it. I think those are the right kind of lines, and I would love to see this team do that kind of stuff. I don't know how I honestly, Joel, you might know this. Is there like a escrow account that has to hold all the future cash?
I am not as attuned to that as someone that works for the organization, but that is an interesting thing to consider.
I
don't know how it works. I know that it has to work like that in the NFL,
right?
Because the guaranteed, it's all guaranteed, so it's not like you have to do that for guaranteed money in the NFL.
Yeah, I just, again, I'm just back of my head. I've got, hey, what happens if they're trying to build a new stadium and all that stuff. I hope this team does the right thing. Yeah. I hope that they pony up a little bit because, this core is exciting me. It's been the most exciting, brand of baseball I've got to watch since the World Series team and since that World Series core. And I know there's a lot of chaos around it, but man, I really enjoy watching these guys play.